Jack Mallers recently went on Bloomberg and announced that Bitcoin could be a $500 trillion asset. That would represent a Bitcoin price tag in the hundreds of millions of dollars. When we run the numbers, you'll understand how the Bitcoin multiplier effect will get us to a price tag of Bitcoin in the hundreds of millions of dollars. But let's first listen to Jack and why he believes Bitcoin could be worth 500 trillion.
And it kind of went viral on X after we spoke, but it was this idea of existing and being paid to exist through cryptocurrency. The idea that, you sitting there at work all day long, you're not necessarily being compensated for what you're doing, and you see crypto as being a solution to that. I got to be honest with you, I didn't quite get it.
Okay.
I want you to paint that picture for me and get me on board.
Yeah, well, so first of all, I think it's Bitcoin, not crypto. You know that, but just to clarify for the audience, it's Bitcoin specific.
Well, that's just your view that Bitcoin is the crypto that you're focused on.
Yeah, but I think Bitcoin is the money within the crypto sphere.
Okay.
And the point really here is this, Tim. Every single day, you make a decision on how to get compensated for your time, your energy, your effort, your labor. I'm watching you. I'm sitting in the behind the scenes. I'm watching you haul your butt. You're doing a great job on this show. You need to somehow capture the value you're creating for all of us here. And you need to somehow save that value so that tomorrow you can pay rent, you can get groceries, you can travel home and see your parents.
But that comes every 2 weeks in the form of a paycheck to me.
Right, but what the
Bloomberg sees the value in that. They hired me.
Correct, so you're going to get a paycheck in the form of dollars, but those dollars are losing value in the things that you need in your life, anywhere between 2 and 20%. Depends on what you want. You want a Caesar salad? 2%. You want a nice house? 20%. And so you need to find a way to persist and save and store that wealth. And you make a decision every single day, whether you know it or not. Unfortunately, because the dollar is being debased, everyone is a speculator here filming and watching us. And so you have to make that decision. And in my opinion, over the last 15 years, and it will continue to be so, Bitcoin is the best place to do that. Take the wealth you're creating today, bring it with you tomorrow.
So I think Jack makes a really good point. Again, $500 trillion is the market for money, as we're about to dive into here in a moment. Again, if we look at some of the largest buckets of wealth around the world, we always talk about real estate. Today, that's over $350 trillion of wealth is stored in real estate. We know that there's hundreds of trillions of dollars of money parked in fiat currencies, bonds. We can see there's about $129 trillion of cash. There's $135 trillion in the global equities market. You can see there's $27 trillion in art, cars, and collectibles in this little purple square. And then there's little tiny old Bitcoin in the top left-hand corner of our screen. We can see it in orange, and it is tiny. It's $2 trillion, and people are debating over whether Bitcoin's worth $100,000 today or $125,000 tomorrow. But I think when you zoom out and when you run the numbers that we are about to run in a moment here, I think all of this will be insignificant. And I think Bitcoin at 100 or 200, or as VanEck believes where Bitcoin is going to be in the not too distant future, I think all of this is a rounding error. Before we get into kind of zooming out and crunching some numbers here, let's listen to what the CEO of VanEck recently predicted on the mainstream media, also on Bloomberg this week as well. Again, are you guys noticing a trend here? We got Jack Mallers, we got the CEO of VanEck going on Bloomberg and the mainstream media, all making very bullish Bitcoin price predictions while the price is down. What do they know that we don't? Again, smart money typically knows where the price is going next, but let's listen to VanEck.
This issue, and during the darkest, coldest days of the crypto winter, Matt Siegel was messaging me about his belief, his faith, and that was at $15,000. Now we're at $115,000. What gave you that faith to lead on crypto?
I mean, it's just a feeling that for Bitcoin, it's digital gold, and I just say, listen, at some point it'll be half the value of physical gold, and that's about $400,000. And I think we're just maturing our way there. I think over the last month, what's been amazing is the stablecoin news. And so I call the Genius Act the third most important piece of bank regulation in U.S. history, because you now can be a tech company and compete in the payments area. Throughout U.S. history, you needed to be a bank. Now you can be a tech company. And that'll take a year. It'll take 4+ quarters. But the revolution that's going to happen on Wall Street is incredible.
I couldn't agree more. I think we're going to see a revolution on Wall Street, especially when we start running the really crazy bullish numbers surrounding this Bitcoin multiplier effect. Because again, let's go back to what Jack said. $500 trillion of wealth. That's the opportunity that Bitcoin is. I think the numbers that most people haven't run is they haven't actually sat down and thought, okay, if $500 trillion wanted to hypothetically flow into Bitcoin, what would that mean for the price? Again, a lot of people just go, oh, 500 trillion divided by 21 million. And then all of a sudden, people just think that we're going to arrive at a Bitcoin price tag somewhere around 20 million. But Bitcoin doesn't work like that. Bitcoin is not only an apex predator and an apex asset, but it's an exponential asset. We know that there's 21 million Bitcoin available for sale today, but because it's rare, because it's scarce, there is a multiplier effect that impacts Bitcoin's market cap. So again, let's not forget, today that multiplier effect is somewhere around 6x. So that means for every $1 that wants to actually flow into Bitcoin, pushes the market cap up by 6x. So again, when we start thinking about big numbers, whether you think Bitcoin's worth digital gold, like the VanEck CEO just said, and you think $20 trillion can flow into Bitcoin, or whether you think Bitcoin is money, it's 1/2 of every transaction, kind of makes sense that eventually Bitcoin will be half of every monetary transition, or a half of every monetary transaction. And again, that would represent $500 trillion when you consider the fact that there's $900 trillion in the world today. So again, it doesn't matter what numbers you run, something that I think most people just need to be aware of is this multiplier effect. Because when you start considering the multiplier effect, things get incredibly bullish. So this was some old maths that I ran from a while ago, where we can see Grayscale's CEO said that the approval of spot Bitcoin ETFs will unlock $30 trillion worth of wealth. And at the time, you could see I ran the numbers. I said 30 trillion times a 4.5 multiplier. That would represent $135 trillion market cap, or a $6.42 million Bitcoin price tag. The reason why I showed you this example was because 30 trillion, that's kind of similar to where gold is valued today, somewhere around 21 to 23 trillion dollars. If Bitcoin can get $30 trillion of capital, we're looking at $6 million Bitcoin. Okay, this is how the multiplier effect dramatically changes things. And you guys will probably notice, hey, hang on a minute, the multiplier effect is more like 6 right now, not the 4.5 like it was back in 2023 when I ran those numbers. And that is because the more Bitcoin that leaves the exchanges, the more rare the Bitcoin becomes, the less Bitcoin there is available for sale, the higher and the higher this Bitcoin multiplier effect will rise. This is only a matter of time. And again, I think things are going to get really interesting here in the future, because again, Bitcoin today, it's only worth $2 trillion. And a lot of people have the hubris to believe that, oh, we have 16 years of data now. Bitcoin's easy to predict. Again, it's not popular to say this, but I just don't think we can model Bitcoin. I don't think Bitcoin's predictable. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. It's still so small. Whether you think it's worth 500 trillion or 50 trillion, if you're a little bit more conservative, even if you're on the conservative side and you think Bitcoin can just capture or attract $50 trillion of capital, we're only at 2. As if believing you can model Bitcoin when it's at what, 4% of its total addressable market cap? I think that's absurd. I think that's it's dangerous. Let's just say that. I can't say too much on a live stream. But I think, like Jake says here, I tend to agree. Larry Fink is probably trying to accumulate cheaper sats for longer than we may be thinking. Again, this is why I just believe that a lot of these big guys are buying Bitcoin, and they've been buying Bitcoin for a while. I'm not going to trust Larry Fink as far as I can throw him. I'm actually going to do a little bit of an expose on Larry Fink this week in a video I've already filmed, because again, to your point, Jake, I just don't trust the guy. Who knows how much Bitcoin Larry Fink wants to acquire before he really lets the price run, okay? Before we talk about that and where I think this Bitcoin multiplier effect could actually go in the future. Again, it's gone from about 3 to 6x in the past 5 years. Where could it go in the future? I think that's a question we haven't really explored on this channel, and that's something I do want to tackle in a moment. But before we do, while we're talking about Larry, I always encourage you guys, never trust Larry Fink, never trust Michael Saylor, never trust any CEO of a publicly traded company. Bitcoin is all about self-sovereignty. It's all about financial sovereignty, but you only get that if you hold on to your own Bitcoin keys. If you do that, nobody can seize your Bitcoin. Nobody can trace your Bitcoin. If you're smart about it, you can, let's just say, become a little bit of a financial engineer, but you can only do that if you do hold your own Bitcoin in one of these, in a hardware wallet. So I'm massive on self-custody on this channel. I've been encouraging you guys to take self-custody on your Bitcoin since day one on this channel. If you want to get your hands on a Trezor, I highly encourage you guys to check them out. They're going to give you a 5% discount on a Trezor if you use a promo code Luke5 at the link down below. Again, have a look at that. That's a touchscreen hardware wallet. That's gorgeous, super easy to use. Again, if you're after a different hardware wallet, I also always encourage you guys to check out Ledger as well. I love Ledger and I also love Trezor. They're the two oldest Bitcoin hardware wallet companies in the entire space. Both of them have been around since 2013. They're old, they've got a trusted track record. So I highly recommend you go and put your Bitcoin into some of the best hardware wallets in the space. Let's just say that. They're all great, but I love Ledger, I love Trezor. Those are the ones that I recommend. You can also get a discount on ledgers, any of the ledgers that you want to buy, if you use the link down below in the description. So again, do not trust Larry Fink. Bitcoin is a financial revolution, but it is only a revolution if you hold your own Bitcoin keys. And I always remind you guys as well, don't stop, don't think you've won the race once you're holding a Bitcoin hardware wallet. There's a little bit more to your journey. Yes, it's great to hold a hardware wallet, but make sure you back up your Bitcoin 12 or 24 words on something like titanium that will last for generations. That's why I've been partnered with Stampseed for 13 or 14 months now. It's been well over a year, and that's because they're a product I think everybody needs in the space. I've used their titanium plates for yonks. As you can see, they're beautiful, they're gorgeous, they're small, they're clean, they're mean, and they are real titanium. I don't know if you guys can hear this, but she's real metal, baby. So again, go check out Stampseed. They're going to give you a 15% discount on anything you want to buy from the shop. So again, go check them out. And now that we have our Bitcoin in self-custody, let's talk a little bit more about where I expect this Bitcoin multiplier effect to rise in the future. I think this doesn't need an PhD in astrophysics or engineering to understand this. As Bitcoin becomes more rare, you're going to have less and less Bitcoin on exchanges. We've seen this happen for the past 4 years, despite what some of the deniers will try to claim. I think it's pretty clear we're living through a supply suffocation. And again, I want to be clear here and make the caveat. Just because we've seen this trend of Bitcoin leaving the exchanges for 5 years, this doesn't mean that somebody cannot put 80,000 Bitcoin on the exchanges at a higher price, like we saw recently. We saw one of the largest sales in Bitcoin history. What was it? How long ago was this? This was a month ago when Grayscale received that 80,000 Bitcoin sell order. I just want to be really clear. Just because I talk about this trend of Bitcoin leaving the exchanges, it doesn't mean that I don't think somebody can put 20,000 Bitcoin on the exchange tomorrow and sell it. I mean, obviously there is spikes to any trend, and you can see pretty clearly. Like, there are times where somebody puts 100,000 Bitcoin back on the exchanges. So again, I just want to make that caveat, because I don't know how, but some people think that I'm saying things that I'm not. I think this chart is pretty self-explanatory. You can see there's 2.5 million Bitcoin left on exchanges today. That's what the chart says. So again, now that caveat's to the side, what happens if this trend continues? Where does the Bitcoin multiplier effect inevitably go into the future? I think it's going to go much higher. Now, again, caveats, nobody can model where this thing will go. All we can say is that we have numbers and data today that shows us very clearly that the multiplier effect has risen from about 2.5x to something like 6x over the past 5 years that we've seen a supply suffocation. Now, I just think this is going to continue to rise and rise and rise. The scarcer that Bitcoin gets, the more scarce that Bitcoin becomes, the higher the multiplier effect is going to go. It really is as simple as that. And I think, again, it's probably worth touching on. Bank of America claims that the Bitcoin multiplier effect was 118x during a very short period of time. I naturally kind of disagree with that, because I think they're only looking at Bitcoin on a daily basis. Sure, you can see some wild swings when you're really zoomed in on Bitcoin. But all I will say is that, hey, zoom out. I think I like to look at the data that I look at, because it's looking at a 2 to 3 year moving average of the Bitcoin multiplier effect. That's the chart that I always go back to. It's a 2 year moving average on the Bitcoin multiplier effect. And I think this kind of, I think this is the most realistic thing to look at. Long-term moving averages are a lot more trustworthy. Again, all of these models will be broken to the upside. Don't trust anything I say. This is the model that I always go back to, the Bitcoin market cap gain per dollar invested. And you can see this in the purple line, how it's began setting new all-time highs in 2024. Again, this is an old tweet. This is from February 2024. You can see it down the bottom. But again, where was the price of Bitcoin in February 2024? It was very low. I think it was around $30,000 to $40,000. And I said, look, it's pretty interesting that the multiplier effect's been rising for 2 to 3 years. And I think it's even more interesting that it's even higher right now, because we do continue to see these divergences between long-term holders and short-term holders. More and more Bitcoin is getting locked up into the coffers of people who do not want to sell Bitcoin for a very, very, very long time. And I think the growing cohort of people who want to buy Bitcoin, accumulate Bitcoin, and never sell the Bitcoin, that's only going to rise here for a little while. Prison Planet chimes into the chat. I believe that there'll be more of a pullback until the rate cuts in September. That's an interesting take. Again, I'm more bullish in the near term than I've probably never been. Post-September, I'm so bullish for the end of Q4. Again, with the caveats, nobody knows where the price is going, especially me. But again, we've got rate cuts coming by the Fed. We've got Donald Trump. He's one of the first presidents in US history to endorse an asset. He's endorsing Bitcoin. He's saying, you should never sell your Bitcoin. We're never selling our Bitcoin. That's incredibly bullish. We have this supply suffocation being set up by the publicly traded companies and the ETFs. We've got Larry Fink shilling our bags. I honestly couldn't be any more bullish. But again, like in the near term, something that I showed you guys recently was some of the data looking at Bitcoin seasonality. So we did have a look at how typically August and September are some of Bitcoin's worst months. Now, again, I'm not saying September is going to be a trash month. I'm telling you, I don't know where the price of Bitcoin is going to go over the next couple weeks. All I'm going to show you is that October, November, and December, historically very, 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 very bullish, okay? September, historically, has been one of Bitcoin's worst months with an average of minus 3.77%. Again, who knows where the price of Bitcoin is going to go? You could make an argument to say maybe Bitcoin front runs September a little bit with the most recent correction that we have seen. It's a little bit of a bloodbath when we check in here on the price chart of Bitcoin. We are down a lot. If we have a look, we're down. Oh, no, we're not. We're down 13%. Where are all the doomers and what does British Hodl call them? The $5 net worth doomers? I don't know what British calls them, but I mean, I don't know why everybody's freaking out right now. We're down 13%. Wow. Okay. I'm even more bullish. But again, who knows where Bitcoin's going to go? All I'm going to tell you and encourage you guys is to just take self-custody of your Bitcoin, get your Bitcoin in order. October, November, and December, I think it's going to melt faces. Again, October's average return for Bitcoin, 21%. November's average return for Bitcoin, 46%. And December's a plus 4%. And if you look at what Bitcoin does in bull runs, it's even more bullish. So again, if Bitcoin just repeats what we've done in bull runs, we're talking about $200,000 Bitcoin much quicker than most people think. And I just think a lot of people are going to get left on the sidelines. I think it's as simple as that. I think we're at what, $110,000 today. Let's have a look. We're $108,000, and a lot of people just think we can't see parabolic moves. A lot of people think that the bullish headlines are just clickbait. When you kind of zoom out, I think it's kind of inevitable that exchanges are suppressing the price of Bitcoin. Somebody's suppressing the price of Bitcoin. Again, you could have called that clickbait back in 2022 before we actually had hard evidence showing us that a multi-billion-dollar exchange, the biggest exchange in the world, FTX, was suppressing the price of Bitcoin when they went bankrupt in 2022. They were supposed to hold 80,000 Bitcoin, and when the bankruptcy filings came out, how many Bitcoin did FTX hold? 0. That's paper Bitcoin. Okay, and again, a lot of people would say, okay, Luke, but that's just one example. And again, just for the record, I was telling people, don't use FTX, don't use BlockFi, don't use Celsius. I was saying this in videos way back in 2022. Go check the receipts. I was saying, if you don't know where the yield is coming from, you are the yield. Okay, I've said that from day one. Be very, very careful with who you trust if you are going to try to chase yield in Bitcoin. I've said that for yonks. But again, what happened? FTX blew up, BlockFi blew up, Celsius blew up. They were all running paper Bitcoin games. So to just assume, I think it's happening again. I'm not sure if that's clickbait. Let me know in the comments. I'd be interested what you guys think. Retail caused the parabolic moves, and retail has left Bitcoin. Probably for good. That's a spicy take, Phil. I think retail will come back one day, but they're certainly not here right now. I will say that. And Foxy makes a great point. Be careful with any exchange. Couldn't agree more. Be careful. Be careful. If you don't know where the yield is coming from, you are probably the yield. Again, I always encourage you guys, just keep it simple. Buy Bitcoin. Put it in self-custody. Again, for those people who want to get their hands on anonymous Bitcoin, I think mining it is one of the best solutions for you guys to explore. If you do want to learn a little bit more about simple mining, highly recommend you check those guys out. You can do hosted mining with simple mining, or you can buy your own mining rigs. So again, if you guys use the link in the description of today's show, they're going to give you a year's worth of free repairs on any of your miners. And again, highly recommend you check out the hosting service that you can take advantage of on simple mining. They are, I think, the best solution to get your hands on non-KYC Bitcoin. And again, mining Bitcoin, it's a great way. Let's just say, to get my hands on my non-KYC Bitcoin, I went through a lot more of a cumbersome process, but I won't say too much about that online. What I will say is that there's 592 of you guys tuning in on a Saturday. If you enjoyed this one, make sure you subscribe. I got a ton of content coming this week. If you want to watch a few of my more recent deep dives into Bitcoin, I'm going to put links to some videos somewhere around there. And with all that said, thank you so much to everybody who tuned in. I'll see you all in the next live stream. Have a good weekend. Probably see you tomorrow.